What's up fam, my name is Tech and welcome to my DPS Hunter build guide. Hunter gets a bad rap from most of the Legends community, myself included. However, to make this guide I've been playing the class a lot and I've been very impressed. I was even able to clear Nightmare with another Hunter and 2 Ronin. So let's get into the build starting with your techniques. First off is your ultimate, Eye of Uchitsune. This ultimate is fairly standard among the damaging ultimates. It targets 3 enemies and headshots them. To me, it's the most satisfying ultimate behind the Samurais. Next up are your abilities. Normally I would just tell you which one to pick and move on, but I think for Hunter, discussing this is important. The first is Staggering Arrow, and I think this is the biggest reason why people think Hunter is weak when they first play the class. It stuns enemies in an area for several seconds, does little to no damage, and doesn't even deal any stagger damage contrary to the name. During the stun, you can attack enemies, however, you don't get a free assassinate on stunned enemies, and once an enemy is hit, they're no longer stunned. By the time you actually kill one enemy, the rest are already recovered. This means the ability basically gives you one non-Oni kill every 55 seconds. The only thing this ability is useful for is getting revives, which a smoke bomb is much better for. The fact that this ability is so underwhelming and you are locked to it until level 10 makes leveling Hunters seem like such a slog, and it makes them feel far weaker than their overall potential. Explosive Arrow, on the other hand, is one of the strongest abilities in this game and is the focus of this build. It does damage in an area comparable to Staggering Arrow, and it sets all enemies hit on fire. The cooldown is exactly the same as Staggering Arrow, and it interrupts most enemies. In this build, the fire damage will be enough to one-shot most non-Oni targets on gold, and will do significant damage on Nightmare. This ability outclasses Staggering Arrow so much, I don't think there's any justifiable reason one would have it over this. Moving on to your perks, take Hunter Unleashed for the cooldown reduction. You'll want Explosive Arrow up as much as possible. For your second perk, you will be using fire damage a lot, so take status damage. The other 2 options are good for quality of life, but I don't think they can compete with more damage. The third perk in this build is the one most open to preference. Pinpoint is probably the most reliable option. It will improve your damage in the mid to close range when you don't have time to go for headshots. Also, it pairs well with Executioner in the first slot if you like that instead of Hunter Unleash. All-Seeing Eye will make you better at clearing groups, which is quite strong. And Legendary can be quite good if you want to run a Legendary bow, as in this build you will be running Spirit Kunai. Side note, if you do end up running Skipping Stone as your second Legendary, since you hit 2 targets with headshots, it's almost the same as running All-Seeing Eye. Moving on to the gear. For my katana, I always recommend water katanas. Try to get ability cooldown reduction for your stats. For perks, I often run Water Master because I like to break guards as often as possible. However, Way of the Flame can be quite strong in this build since you have an emphasis on fire damage and reduced cooldowns. Your bow is mostly up to preference, but I like to get headshot damage and draw speed, as well as helmet piercing ammo. If you don't have a Hunter Charm, take either a Utility Charm or a Stealth Charm. With those, you can get either fire damage or status effect damage in the first stat slot, then you can get ability cooldown reduction in the second. Then for your perk, take Fire Master. If you were lucky enough to roll a Hunter Charm, take the above stats. Also consider Explosive Arrow Radius as well as the Foul Arrows perk. For your Ghost Weapon, take Spirit Kunai with damage increase and supermassive. You can also try to get status effect duration in the first slot. For the second Ghost Weapon, most of the time I like to run Healing Gourd, just because I like to be able to manage my own healing at least a bit. However, I've recently been running Demon Seize for the damage increase to make Spirit Kunai stronger and the status effect duration for more fire damage. Also, the Weaken and Fired Up effect helps you hold points better. When you play Hunter, you want to play proactively more than the other classes. You have high DPS, but once enemies get on the point, you don't have the strongest options when fighting them in melee. So to be most optimal, you want to be at the enemy spawns before they start. As soon as you see the group, shoot Explosive Arrow to hit as many enemies as possible. On Gold, this will be enough to kill many enemies by itself, but on Nightmare you will have to continue hitting enemies from a distance. Between your fire and range damage, most enemies will be to half health or below by the time they make it to the point. This is where Spirit Kunai comes in. Usually, you'll be able to kill 1 or more of them with Spirit Kunai, which will reduce the cooldown of Explosive Arrow. And when your second Explosive Arrow is up, you can finish the rest of the group or take it to the next point to clear it. When you have to defend a point solo, you want to weave in and out of the circle more than any other class. You're the weakest class in the game defensively, so always keep moving. Moving in and out of the circle will give you a better view of the enemies that are nearby, which will help you avoid them, and it will also give you a few seconds to line up some arrow shots. You want to be killing whatever enemy is most vulnerable, and you want to be playing around 3 things: your Explosive Arrow, your ultimate, and your teammates. If your Explosive Arrow is close to ready, look for 1 or 2 low health enemies and then kill them with the kunai. If your resolve is almost full, look to get aggressive to build resolve. And when rotating between points, you'll always want to keep in mind your resources. If you have both your ultimate and your explosive arrow, clearing a point should be no problem. If you don't have either and you're able to communicate with your team, let them know you'll hold the point but you will need help. If you like this video, drop a like so the YouTube algorithm loves me. And if you want more Legends guides, check out my playlist on screen. Later fam.